if you made a press with the Jiffy press clamps, the first thing you want to do is to take your make ready with the 5 by 7 inch template. You have your pencil lines so you know the border. I drop that onto the flat printing press. I take my screen, and then what I do is I shift around my artwork. I press down and I look to see my pencil line. If I have a bleed, I want my artwork to go just a little bit outside of that bleed. So I get everything aligned and I can move my screen. Once I have that aligned, I then take my press clamps, I loosen those up, and then I tighten those down with the wing nut on the top, and I tighten this one down here. And that will lock everything in place and nothing will move. To create my 3-point registration, I take some of my masking tape, and with my sheet of paper aligned in the press, on the bottom edge and on the left-hand side, I'm just taking and I'm placing these 3 strips to create my registration. So left and right, and I do the bottom. So now I know that every time I'm printing and I take my sheet of paper, I'll bring it over and I'll align it with the 3 points on my table. And then everything will be in register and the artwork will print in the exact same spot each time. Now that I'm ready to print, I grab my paper stock. I kept my paper stock uncut, 8.5 by 11, 65 pound to 80 pound cardstock. I ended up grabbing a bunch of different colors just to experiment with. So if you have a bleed, make sure not to cut down to that 5 by 7 inch size. You can always cut it down later. So I keep that right on the side of my press so it's easy to grab at hand. I have my mixed ink. I have my spatula, and you can use, a piece of cardboard or a mixing stick. And then what I like to do is to prop up the screen, I'll just take my ink container, and I'll take that ink container and I'll slide it underneath, and that's what I use to prop the screen up and to lower it. All right, so now I'm ready to print. So I'm going to take and remove my ink container, and I'm going to make sure my ink, that everything is mixed up and that it's all looking good. And one tip when printing, you can always add fresh ink into your print. So I don't add all my ink at once. I add in a little bit of ink and then I keep adding fresh ink. So right now, as far as printing temperatures, it's late evening around 6:30. The sun is set. It's not as hot out. I take my squeegee, and the first thing that I want to do is I want to flood the ink into my stencil. So with one pass, I will flood. Then with 2 hands and even pressure. You don't want the squeegee 100% vertical. You want it to dip down just ever so lightly. And then what I do is I push down until I hear the squeegee hit the table. And that's the pressure you want to hold as you're doing your pass. So as soon as I push down, even pressure, then I lift up and I push my ink back and I lean my squeegee down, and then I take my ink container and then I place that on the side. And that's my first color. I'll take that and repeat these steps. So to continue the process, I'll take my next sheet. I will align that here. Get everything smoothed out. I lower the press, even pressure, straight back, lift up, flood the ink back, and carefully lean the squeegee back so it doesn't fall off the press. And then I just continue to repeat those steps. All right, so I take and I align my artwork for my 3-point registration. I drop the press down, even pressure, straight back, lift up, flood back. So each sheet that I take, I'm aligning it in the exact same spot with my tape and my 3-point registration. So everything is printing well. I have a nice crisp image. I'm going to do about 6 to 8 prints, so I have some extra in case I make a mistake on the next color. Dry time takes about a half hour to 45 minutes. By the time you clean up this, you should be able to print your next color. If when you're printing a lot of ink is going down and it's sticking to the back of the screen and it's not staying on your table, you can take a little bit of spray adhesive, so just a little bit of Super 77 or any 3M spray adhesive, and then just lightly spray. You don't need very much, just mist it a little bit and add a little bit of tack to your palette. And then when you print, nothing will then stick to the back of the screen. So that's one other tip if you have some of your prints and they are sticking to the back of the screen. When you're done printing, just take some of the excess ink, and I have some old cardboard. I cut up into these small squares, and I just take and cart the ink as best as possible off of my screen. I also take the squeegee, and then I cart that back in, and I get all that ink back in my container. Then I can take these over to the sink, and they're water soluble, and with water and soap, just wash them out. All right, so I just cleaned out my screen. I got all the ink out. I let it dry outside. Now I'm ready to adhere color number 2. So I take my vinyl sticker and I peel off my sticker, and I take my sticker and I adhere that to the back of the screen. I take my vinyl squeegee and I get all my air bubbles out. I'm on to ink number 2. So now I have my white with the transparent extender. I waited for my prints to dry about a half hour to 45 minutes, depending on the heat. Now I need to register my second color. So I took my screen, I have my first print down, and I'm gonna move around the screen. I have a bleed off of one side. I get it registered exactly where I want it to be. I double check the positioning. Now with my press Jiffy clamps, I tighten down the wing nuts. Now that I have that in register, I take one of my ink containers to prop the screen up. I prop up my screen, And now I'm going to create my registration. Same process that we're going to repeat. So for my 3-point registration, registration 1 on the left-hand side, registration number 2 on the right-hand side, and then registration number 3 on the bottom. So now I have my sheet of paper, my screen is in register, and I'll be dropping that down in the exact same spot each time. Now I'm ready to go ahead and print. Just as a general reminder before you start printing, you want to take your cardboard. I have 2 pieces of cardboard cut out. I take a piece of my tape, and to create the off contact on the back side of the screen, on the right hand and on the left hand corner, I will create my off contact. All right, I'm ready to print ink number 2. I lower my screen. I take my white ink with the transparent thinner. I mix everything up just to ensure nothing's separated. My ink is looking good. All right, so I'm going to add a little bit of my ink in at a time. So I'll add in my white. First step, I take my squeegee, and we always want to flood the ink. What flooding does is, 1, that preps the area for your screen printing. Second, it also slows down the ink dry time. So always wanting to keep wet ink inside of your stencil. Nice even pressure. I come straight back, I lift up, I flood, and then I drop my squeegee down. So once you get into a rhythm, print, flood the ink back so it doesn't dry on the screen, prop up your screen, grab your next sheet, align it with your registration. You can go through these prints rather quickly. I'm printing about 10 sheets. It probably takes me less than 15 minutes to go through 10 of these cards. All right, so now that I have all of my prints done and complete, I'll clean this ink out and then I'll print my next color. All right, so I just added some of my yellow ink in for my third and final color. I'm going to drop my sheet down, get everything aligned, even pressure, come straight back, flood, and now I have my third print. I have this beautiful transparency, and now I'll work my way through all of my prints. And I have 2 colors of paper. I have this darker teal blue and I have a lighter teal blue. So each one of those gives a little bit of a different look, and then I can decide later which card I like the best. Even pressure, straight back, flood, and then drop it down. Now you want to try and work quickly because this is air dry ink, and depending on what time of day you're printing, you don't want it to dry in the screen. So I have all my paper stock right next to me. Everything is ready to go.